I've just realised that I am wearing the exact same top that I was wearing in my last video. Oh well, we'll just go with it. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing really well. So as you probably saw from the title of today's episode, today I am doing a reaction video. I've never done one of these before, but I am very excited about doing this one because I am reacting to my original ranking of the Scream franchise. That is all 5 of the movies to date. But before we get started, have you seen I've done a little tweaking and tinkering to my backdrop? I'm absolutely in love with it. I've managed to put in all my little bits and pieces that I showed in my recent haul. Plus I have these 2 street signs, road signs, Camp Crystal Lake and Elm Street. So yes, I'm very happy with my new little backdrop. So in today's episode, we're going to rewatch my ranking of the Scream movies, see if my opinions have changed at all, and most importantly, see if my ranking has changed, because when I did this original ranking back in January, this was based off of one watch of Scream 5. And I did address this in the episode. I said that what had happened with Scream 4 was I got on the hype train, loved it, time passed, and I realised it maybe wasn't as good as I had thought it was. And I didn't want to do the same thing with Scream 5. So I knew that I had to let time pass, and I knew that I had to rewatch the film to then have a look and see where it actually fit in my ranking of the movies. So as this week the physical media copy of Scream 5 was released and my copy arrived through the door, my son and myself rewatched Scream 5 this afternoon, and we've literally just finished it, and I have come up to do this video for you guys because I wanted to rewatch, see what it was that I had said, see if I still agree with what I said, see if I still agree with the ranking, which, little spoiler, perhaps there are a few changes in positions in the movies. But let's watch the video and we'll talk as we go through it. Hi guys, I hope you're all doing really well. So in today's episode, as you probably saw from the title, I am doing a ranking of all of the Scream movies in the franchise. And what I'm going to do is talk about the franchise as a whole first, and then I will rank each of the movies from worst to best and do a little mini review of each of them as we go. So before we start, I just want to say that Scream is possibly the most important horror movie to me. It is not only one of the first, very closely followed by Psycho, but Scream is the most important one. Favourites. It's that perfect combination of a genuinely really good movie, but it's also full of very happy nostalgia for me as well. I think that Scream definitely has the most consistency in quality when it comes to movies out of the majority of the horror franchises. I mean, even the worst installments in this franchise are still really good films. I agree with that. And I think that proves, I would die on that hill, that Scream is one of the most consistent franchises. If Scream 3 or 4 is the worst installment, then you're doing something pretty well. Proves how strong Scream is as a franchise on a whole. I think that Scream, in my opinion, has the best final girl of any horror movie, hands down. I cannot... Yep, again, I agree. Sidney Prescott is the best final girl. Yeah. What more can you say? She feels very real, and we see a lot of growth in her character throughout the movies. She's strong and resilient, funny and vulnerable. That is something that the Scream franchise do really well, is their character development, their character growth. I think the characters feel very fleshed out, very accessible, very human. And I think that's why they're so well loved. They're not just two-dimensional, or they're not just following the typical final girl tropes. She's more than just that, I think. They really did a good job with Sidney as well. I mean, yeah, she kicks ass, don't get me wrong, but she also cries and feels the weight of the grief at losing her friends and her loved ones. She has this incredible ability to just be so vulnerable and absolutely break your heart. There's one scene in Scream 2 after Derek has been attacked in the sorority house, and you can just see the look on Sidney's face as her eyes well up with tears as she realises that it's happening again. And then there's another one. Changes a bit, doesn't it, by Scream 5. She's just had it at that point. Dewey is an unusual hero for a film. He's actually an unusual love interest as well, and he's quite goofy in the earlier movies. This is something that I really love about the Scream franchise, is that not only do we have a final girl, but we have a final trio. It's not just a final girl, a final boy. We have the 3 characters, all of which are very distinct in their personality and characteristics. But they really strengthen each other, I think, by playing to each other's strengths, to playing to each other's dynamics. I'm not sure one of them on their own in a movie would have survived without the help of the others. Not to take away anything from them as individuals, but I think them as a trio does make them stronger. Movies, but he's very funny. One of my favourite Dewey scenes is in the original Scream, where he's talking to his boss, the sheriff, and the sheriff is having a stress cigarette, and Dewey's at the side of him having a stress ice cream. And Dewey. It just cracks me up every time that I see that scene. I just want to preface this ranking by saying that there is not a single film on this list that I dislike. I absolutely love all of them, and apart from my first place and my 5th place, the middle 3 are all much of a muchness. They're all interchangeable, and to be honest with you, my genuine ranking would probably look like this. To be honest with you, that's still kind of true. First place and 5th place are just locked in, I think, but the middle 3 are still interchangeable. But there's possibly been a little bit of change in the last 3 months. But this is such a strong franchise, and there is not a single film on this that I don't like and that I wouldn't rewatch. So yeah, this still kind of holds up. But that would be pretty boring. So I have forced myself to prise them apart with a crowbar and actually make an order for you. Okay, so starting off the ranking, coming in at 5th place is Scream 4. Now, for the longest time after its release, I felt like this was my second favourite in the franchise. I definitely rewatched it a lot, and I, would go to grab it as a comfort movie. But this is the movie that is the reason why I didn't want to get carried away with the hype of Scream 5, because I was so excited for the release of Scream 4. And as time passed, I just realised it wasn't as good as I thought it was. But for the longest time, it was a comfort movie, probably more so than the previous 3 films in the franchise. Over time, and especially with this latest Scream marathon, I've come to realise that it's actually my least favourite. I personally think this is the weakest in the franchise. I loved that Dewey is now the sheriff. It's like we've gone full circle, and we get a much more serious portrayal of him in this film as well, and it's very entertaining watching Gale. That's true. Oh, weather. Just change that post face. Yeah, very true about Dewey. I think he was a more serious character in Scream 4, obviously because he's now the sheriff. He's in a role of authority, but he's often been the source of comedy and light relief in the previous movies, and they really amped that up in Scream 5. That was definitely the most serious version that we've had of him, and to be honest with you, I'm fine with it. I really like that they have the younger, naive slapstick side to him, and then we actually see him grow older, grow through these experiences, and it makes sense that he is now in the place in his life that he is in Scream 5. Is try and be the wife of the sheriff in a small town. Scream 4 does have some really strong new characters as well. I absolutely love Kirby. I think she's fantastic. She's like the new horror movie geek. Kirby was a great addition, and spoilers for an upcoming episode, but I'm thinking of doing a predictions for Scream 6, and yes, Kirby's definitely on my radar for that. I'm taking over the reins from Randy. I'm not, however, really a fan of the addition of Deputy Judy. I know that she's meant to be a red herring, but she just really comes across as creepy. I think that Deputy Judy is a lot better in Scream 5. I didn't mind the character in Scream 5, even though she's on the screen for the tiniest amount of time, but I think they definitely ironed out the kinks that were there for Scream 4. I wasn't a big fan more than anything. I'm also not really a fan of the look of Scream 4. For some reason, they decided to go down the route. Yeah, Scream 4 is the Vaseline one, isn't it? It's just everything's so glossy and smeared, and it's a very strange look. I think the killers in Scream 4 are pretty good. Well, one of them's not as good. I think that Jill's motives are interesting. The idea of her wanting social media fame for essentially not. This is something that I think is a strength for Scream 4, and that is the character of Jill being the killer. I do think that her motives, her drive behind it were incredibly astute, kind of ahead of the time as well, and I genuinely did not see that reveal coming. That was right out of left field. Charlie, however, not so much. In fact, if you haven't seen it already, I have done a ranking of the Ghostface killers, and even after this second watch of Scream 5, it's pretty much still as I left it. And yeah, Charlie I think is a very weak addition, but as entertaining as it was to watch Jill beat herself up, I think the character lost something when they moved it to the hospital. She ends up just becoming this whiny, annoying, entitled little brat. I stand by that. I do think that the third act reveal is pretty good, Charlie aside, but once they get to the hospital, that's when it loses it for me. It just, every intricate bit of planning that she had done is out of the window. There's no way she can come out of this without it being revealed that she's the killer, and it's just too far-fetched at that point. Now, before this next entry, I just want to remind you that I do not dislike any of these movies. But coming in at 4th place is Scream 5. So the reason why Scream 5 is in 4th place is because even though I absolutely loved it, I have only seen, this is where I go into explain whatever I'd explained about 3 times in this episode alone. So the one time. We don't need that bit. I did do a standalone review for Scream 5, so if you're interested in my more in-depth thoughts in it, don't forget to go and check that out if you haven't already. I think that Scream 5 is an incredible sequel and an incredible installment in the franchise, and that is really saying something. I would 100% agree with that. Even on just a first initial watch, it was very, very clear that this film was something special. Radio Silence have really achieved something with this film. I think for it to be the 5th installment in this franchise and to be as good as it is, that is really something. That shows how much they care about the original movie and the franchise itself and what Wes Craven, envisaged. And yeah, it's just, I still can't get my head around it that it's the 5th in the series. If you think about films in, other series like Friday and Nightmare and Halloween especially, by the 5th film, you're kind of down in the dregs. So this just knocked it out of the park. It's such an exciting time to be a Scream fan, considering that it is the 5th film in the franchise, and it's also the first one without Wes Craven or Kevin Williamson. But I think that it's really it fits really well into the franchise through tone and look and quality. Yeah. Scream 5 is a very striking looking movie. In fact, some of the scenes in Scream 5, their cinematography and colour palette, they make them some of my favourite scenes out of all of the movies. 100%, and it really, really stood out to me again with a second viewing at home in a more sort of private, small setting. I really picked up on things that I missed in the cinema, and some of the scenes in this film are some of my favourites out of the entire franchise, purely because of the way that they are framed and shot. All of the movie is shot really well, and they do a really good job with the pacing as well. To say that it's a 2-hour long film, it's probably longer than it needs to be, and at no point does it ever feel like it's dragging on. Again, I would agree, it's longer than it needs to be, but if I was asked what should they have cut from the film, I don't honestly know if I could give you an answer to that, and at no point am I checking my watch or checking my phone. It never feels like it drags, and again, that is something that I imagine is hard to do. The kills are constructed and set up really well as well. They do a really good job in building up tension and playing with your expectations, and I think that the jump scares are really effective in this film as well. This film feels like it's the most emotive and I think that probably my favourite death scenes are the one for Sheriff Judy and her son Wes, because that scene is such a drawn out one, and it leads you into one direction only for the opposite person to be killed, but then the other person that you originally thought would be killed is still killed, but they push it to the point of exhaustion where they build up your tension using sound design and that cliche scare. I can't remember the technical name of it, but where you have the door open and then you close it and you expect someone to be there. It's so well done. Emotional within the franchise. I think the majority of that is down to the return of the legacy characters. There are some really wonderful and I I cried a lot the first time I watched this film, but on the second time I cried even more because knowing what was going to happen, watching like this scene where Dewey and Sydney are talking on the phone, and then later Dewey and Gale, yeah, I cried a lot through this film this second time. Moving scenes between Gale and Dewey and Sydney. And David Arquette is really giving his all in this portrayal. I'm not sure if Scream 5 has the strongest new characters, but I did really... This statement I have changed my mind on. On this rewatch, I think this group of friends, for the most part, is really strong. I think that Mindy and Chad are fantastic, which I think I go on to say in this one, but I did also really like Wes, and I did also like, that might be it, but Liv was a little bland for me, but even then not terrible. She wasn't bad, she was just a little bit unforgettable. But yeah, I think that the friendship circle is stronger than I initially thought it was. Really love the twins, Chad and Mindy Meeks Martin, especially Mindy. Scream 5. Also, I don't know how I missed this the first time. I think it was because I was in the cinema writing notes, so I maybe had my head down at this point. I didn't know that Chad survived. I thought Chad had died. But on this second watch, I saw the scene where the twins are doing their thumbs up to each other, so I was really happy about that. Okay, so the next two were really, really hard for me. I think I don't address it in this episode, it might be my ranking of Ghostface, but I talked about how I was a bit on the fence about the killer's motives in Scream 5 with the toxic fandom, and I wasn't 100% sure about it, but on this second watch, I think I do like it more because, you know, when you're in certain fandom communities and, you know, in the horror community, I'm sure some of you have experienced it, there is some negativity out there. There's also a lot of gatekeeping, and there's a lot of expectation and feeling that you're owed by certain fans. They take more ownership of the films than the actual creators of it. So, you know, the Ambers and the Riches of the world, they're a believable entity, they're a believable thing, and I think that it is a good thing to comment on, because now with social media becoming much bigger since 2011, we are seeing much more toxicity and gatekeeping and things like that. So yeah, I'm much more on board with the motives of the killer than I was on first watch. To distinguish between, in fact, I'll be honest, I think I only really truly decided just before filming this. But coming in at number 3 is Scream 2. Kevin Williamson had played around with sequel ideas while writing the script for the original film. He considered the idea of Sydney in college and there being a ghost face copycat killer. He actually pitched this. This was one of my favourite things about doing this episode. I already knew some of the behind the scenes and backstories to the movies, but not as much as I discovered in my research for this episode, and some of the facts that I found out about Scream 2 and Scream 3 were so fascinating, and that was the most fun I think that I'd had making an episode. Maybe the research for Texas Chainsaw Massacre the original, but yeah, this was really fun to do, finding out all these little potential stories that could have happened and where it all began. The movie faced production difficulties after the script was leaked online, and they had to rewrite who the killers were, which is why some of the aspects of the film and some of the character behaviour doesn't really make sense. I think this is Scream 2's biggest problem, is that the killer reveal had to be changed, and so, like I said, some of the scenes, some of the action, some of the placement of characters doesn't make as much sense. However, again, if you've seen my ranking of Ghostface, there is one of the killers in Scream 2 that I'm a big fan of, and I'm quite happy that it was changed to that person. But I do think that it takes maybe some of the weight away from the reveal, and also from the audience being able to try and figure out who it is, because some of the clues, it just doesn't work. It's 100%. Mickey was never originally intended to be one of the killers. They actually originally played around with the ideas of Mrs. Loomis, Derek the boyfriend, Cotton Weary, and Hallie the roommate. Derek the Dud, as I call him. Yeah, Mick is the killer that I'm a fan of. I think that he's fun to watch as the character of Mickey, but then he's also really entertaining as the killer. He's given it as much Stu Macker as he can do with chewing the scenery, and his line delivery is just hilarious. As strong as Scream 2 is, it does have its weaknesses for me. God awful lunch hall scene.
I love you. Isn't that what life is made of? And though it worries me to say.
No. And I'm not really a fan of Derek the Dud. No offence, Jerry O'Connell, you play him very well. It's just, I find him boring, that's all. And of course, my other main issue with Scream 2 is that it kills off one of my favourite characters in Scream. Well, one of my favourite characters in horror overall, when they kill off Randy.
There's a formula to it. A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
I think that Scream 2 possibly has some of the best kills. Yeah, I'll never... Oh, my pause faces. Yeah, I never get over the fact that Scream 2 kill off Randy. It's like, it's been decades now. Move on. As I hate it and it makes me cry every time I watch it, I have to admit that Randy's death scene is really effective as well. I mean, most of us feel safe in daylight in a very public area, and a lot of kills in horror films are done at night, or at least in the dark. But Randy's is done in the middle of the day on the college campus, surrounded by people. For some reason, Scream 2 feels like... That's another thing. Like I say about the kill setups, I do think that them doing Randy's in the middle of a crowded camp, well, crowded-ish, there's people there in daylight. It's removing those places that you feel safe and showing that there are, what's the word? Amber says it in Scream 5. There are basically anyone can die, because at this point, you know, Randy was the main four. They hadn't become the golden trio yet because Randy had survived with them. So killing off one of the main four, it was showing that anybody could die, and also doing it in broad daylight. It's just, I think it's meant to show how dangerous this Ghostface is. But yeah, still hate it. Like the darkest installment in the franchise. I really enjoy the team of Gale and Dewey teaming up to investigate in this one as well, and I think that we have some of the best character interaction scenes in this one. Yeah, I would agree. I think that this potentially has the best Gale and Dewey combination as they're off investigating, because you see them trying to investigate while they're griping at each other, but then you see them investigating where they really are invested when Gale has... She's crossed that line of she can't remain cold to it anymore. She really is emotionally invested as well. I love when Randy and Sydney are talking about the attacks at the cinema the night before, and when Dewey and Randy are talking in the cafeteria of the college, and then the one where Dewey and Riley and Gale are all together in the college campus as well. And coming in at number 2, cue stuff being thrown at the screen, but coming in at number 2 is Scream 3. I have to say that I was convinced that if anybody watched this ranking and saw that Scream 3 was my second place, that I would have so much abuse in the comments. But I have to say, everybody was really good about it. Everyone was really supportive. So I shouldn't have worried so much. Okay, now let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, this is often considered the worst installment in the franchise, but what's interesting is that it also has some of the darkest subject matter in it when delving into marine... Actually, that's a good point. This is the most comedic and daft, but it has a very dark and nasty storyline at its core. Prescott's backstory and her trauma in Hollywood. Scream has always been slightly ahead of its time. There are actually a couple... The scene. Okay, great pause faces. Yeah, again, this is something, as well as the consistency in quality, the Scream franchise has always been ahead of its time. It's always been able to comment on things socially, even if the rest of society isn't talking about it and commenting on it as much, or isn't as much at the forefront as it will later become. I also love the Randy Meeks cameo. I know that when they killed him off in Scream 2, a lot of fans were really sad about this, and they actually make meta commentary again on this within Scream 3, where they're talking about the killer's probably some annoyed fan That is funny that I had felt so much anger at them killing Randy off in Scream 2, and then they actually poke fun at the fans who were angry about it in Scream 3 because they killed off Randy in Stab 2. They originally played with the idea of Randy having survived his attack in the second film, and he's actually being hidden away by his family recovering from his attack. But they thought that this was too unbelievable and decided not to go with it. Yeah, sure. That's the one that they don't go with because it's too unbelievable. But yet we have the reality and physics defying voice collector and voice changer. And we have Roman being able to fake having no pulse. But sure, Randy surviving, that's going too far. Oh, she's angry. And I also really like the comedy duo of Gail and Jennifer when they're investigating together. Scream 3 is not without its flaws. It's a bit much at times, but yeah, they are a pretty good comedy duo. Though, I absolutely detest the dead mum hallucinations. Always have. I think that they're tasteless, and I think that they stand out like a sore thumb in a franchise that has never included anything else of a supernatural nature. Now, somebody did comment on this, and rightly so, that I don't think it is actually meant to be a supernatural aspect of the movie. I don't think it is actually meant to be a ghost of Sydney's mum. It is just meant to be a dream that Sydney's having, or a hallucination of her, as everything's been flared up because she knows that Ghostface is back. But it does feel supernatural-esque. Even when Sydney would remember her mother or have bad dreams or anything like that, we were never shown it as an audience, and it does still stand out as strange to me, even though I know that it's not actually a ghost, it's not actually supernatural, it is just her dreaming or imagining it. But I do stand by the fact that it does stand out as strange. We also unfortunately have a lot less screen time with Sidney Prescott. This was due to difficulties with filming schedules. Another flaw with Scream, but I will say that the Sidney Prescott in Scream 3 is one of my favourites. I think that she has got to that point now where she's really strong, and even though she's hidden away, you know, she does come out from hiding to help her friends. 3 is that the killer reveal doesn't really pack the same punch because we don't recognise who the killer actually is. And when I watched the film, I went, who is that? I like who the killer is though. I don't mind that. Yeah, it's true. I don't mind Roman as a killer. I think that kudos to him. He is the only one of them that actually manages to do all of it on his own. But the reveal is daft because he looks completely different to how he's looked in the rest of the film. So, not mad that it's him, but I think that the reveal doesn't hit the way they were hoping it would. That it's Roman, and I don't mind his motive either. The whole idea of him, you know, longing for this mother he never knew, and then when he's rejected, that longing turns into anger and jealousy towards Sydney as he feels like she got the life that he should have had. The only aspect that I'm not really sure about with the killer reveal in Scream 3 is how they link it back to the beginning and reveal that it was actually Roman who was the puppet master behind what Billy and Stu did. And I feel like this just takes a little bit of something away from Billy and Stu, and these are two really good, really scary antagonists. And of course, But what I failed to talk about there is that even though Roman takes credit for putting the idea into Billy's head to kill Sydney's mother, he does actually admit that he never imagined that Billy and Stu would carry on and they would do the killings the year later. He just put the idea in his head, and Billy did actually... I mean, I can imagine he planned how to kill Maureen, Sydney's mum, but then everything else was him. So it does take a little bit away from him, but not as much as I make out in that process of elimination. And because, obviously, in first place, it's the original Scream. It hit that sweet spot by having that wonderful combination of a really strong script, a really strong director, and a really strong cast. And Scream was and remains just this wonderful love letter to horror and to horror fans. It also gave us some of the greatest characters within the horror genre in Sidney Prescott, Gale Weathers, Dewey Riley, Randy Meeks, and of course Ghostface. I also think that Scream has potentially one of the most terrifying opening scenes of a film. Absolutely. This still to this day is absolutely terrifying. And going back to what I'd said before, it is just that perfect combination where all the elements were just the best that they could be. The writing, the directing, the acting, everything, the soundtrack. They really looked out with this. Everything just came together to make an almost, if not actually perfect movie. Potentially any scene of a horror film, no matter how many times I watch that opening, it always gets me. The way that it builds for so long, that fear and tension, but then also it's a sign of a good film, isn't it? No matter how many times you've watched it, if if the opening can still scare you and still get under your skin, then sign of a really good movie. Tragic element to it when you see how close Casey Becker is to her parents, how close she is to safety. It's really sad. But it's not enough. And how her parents can hear her over the phone. They actually hear what happens to her. And the original Scream has an incredible third act and killer reveal. Billy Loomis and Stu Macher are two incredible antagonists that just bounce. They are incredible. They are some of the greatest killers and antagonists, but not just as being Ghostface, but just characters in the movie as well. They are scary in different ways. They're entertaining, they're funny, and the third act is fantastic. I think that Stu Macher's house is one of the greatest buildings in any horror movie. Bounce off each other so well and complement each other in their sort of yin and yang of approaches to it, attitudes to it, and motives to it as well. And Matthew Lillard chewing all the scenery is just so entertaining. I mean, he has probably he has my favourite line in the whole franchise.
My mom and dad are gonna be so mad.
So there you have it, guys. I even have that on a print now. I think you could just sit there like... Apart from my first and my fifth place, the middle three are all pretty interchangeable. There's not a single film in this franchise that I don't like or that I think isn't a good film. Very, very true. Very true. Okay, guys, so that was my old ranking back in January, having done a movie marathon of all the Scream movies and having seen Scream 5 only once. And, I wanted to rewatch it and see if my ranking has changed. And yes, my ranking has changed since this original one back in January. I have been able to rewatch Scream 5, let time pass, think about it more, have distance and a break from the movie marathon, and my ranking has changed. I stand by what I said, that there is not a single movie in this franchise that I don't like. I love each and every one of them, even the weaker ones. Each movie has its strengths, and I think that is very rare to find. And my thoughts on Scream 5 have changed as well. I really enjoyed it before. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is an incredible movie. I might have even given it 4.5 out of 5 stars. But there were things that I saw this time around that I didn't before, and have made me love the movie even more. And things that maybe I didn't feel as strongly about or like as much, I like much more this time round. And yeah, Radio Silence created an incredible movie. It is brutal, it's scary, it's moving, it's sad, it's funny, it's beautiful, and I cannot wait for Scream 6. I'm so excited. I think filming begins next month in May, I believe. But yes, so my ranking has changed, but as I mentioned earlier, that there is a hair width difference between Scream 2 and Scream 3 in my last ranking, and I only decided which was which before I filmed that video. I had another situation very similar for this one, and my second and third place, again, there is a hair width between. But yes, so my brand new ranking of the Scream movies is, from worst to best, Scream 4, Scream 3, Scream 5, Scream 2, and Scream. So yes, different ranking, but just because Scream 5 has only moved at one place does not mean that I don't absolutely love it. There is a hair width difference between Scream 2, Scream 5, and Scream 3, to be honest with you. But having had the distance from watching all the movies together, the comedic elements of Scream 3 do make it fun, but also do make it stand out as not as fitting in with the Scream franchise. And Scream 2, while it does kill off Randy, and while it had writing difficulties and that god-awful singing scene, I do still really love it. I think that it is an incredible movie. So yeah, there we go, guys. Were you expecting my ranking to change? Probably, because I did say that they're all interchangeable and I was going to rewatch Scream 5. But there we have it. This was the first time of me doing one of these reaction videos. I hope it turns out okay and it's not just me rambling a bunch of rubbish. Let me know in the comments though if you did like this and if you would like to see any more in the future. I am thinking of doing a reaction to other rankings like my I Know What You Did Last Summer one, because that's probably changed as well. If those are things that you would like to see, then let me know down below. I will also leave links below to my other Scream ranking episode if you want to see that, and my Ghostface ranking. And like I said, I'm thinking of doing a prediction for Scream 6 episode, and then when Scream 6 has come out, I will be able to then go back and have a look at the predictions that I made and see how many I got right or wrong. So again, if that's something you are interested in seeing, let me know if you would like that. But yeah, I'm going to stop rambling. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye guys.